So people hear the term trust and they usually think rich people, but this isn't the case. A trust isn't just about somebody with millions and millions of dollars. It applies to anybody who has kids or any kind of assets like a home, and retirement accounts, pensions, stuff like that. And a trust isn't about necessarily the amount of stuff you have, but it's about controlling the stuff that you do have. So as firefighters or anybody who has a trust, you set it up to control certain things. You want to be able to control who gets what when you pass away. You want to control what happens to your kids, and you want to be able to control and protect what happens to your spouse after you're gone. And a trust is something that sets all these things up and avoids the courts from getting involved in this stuff through probate. So some people may think that if you have a will, that's good enough. And a will does solve certain problems, but it doesn't handle everything. One thing in particular is related to your kids. There's two different things related to the kids. One of them is who's going to take care of them when you're gone. And the other thing is what's going to happen to the assets and how this kid's going to get those assets. And a trust allows you to be more specific with each one of those things. In a trust, you have guardianship you could set up to where, hey, their kids are going to go to family A, B, C based on an order that you set up. And then for the timing and distribution of assets, if you have it in a will, they'll just get a lump sum when they turn 18 based on their portion of it. But in a trust, you could set it up to where they're actually getting a percentage of the amount of the actual amount of all of your assets at certain time periods, whether that's the age of 25, 35, 40, whatever that is, and what you determine and what you put in the trust. So an issue to mention is that the guardianship stuff in a will can still be contested. So if you've got, maybe you want to put the kids with your brother and sister-in-law, and then you have some estranged family like an aunt or uncle or something like that want to have control over the kids or control of your assets. If you don't have it set up clearly in a trust, you can have family stuff fighting over that, either for the kids or for the financial part of it. And a will doesn't protect you from this stuff, but a trust does. So a trust will protect you against that. But if you have a will, the courts are the ones that are going to be determining who gets what and who goes where based on that stuff, especially if there's any kind of contested family stuff. So an issue that I mentioned before in some of the other episodes with probate and estate planning is that you don't want to give a lump sum to somebody who really shouldn't have it. So that 18-year-old getting a lottery ticket, if you had $1 million worth of assets, for example, and you don't have anything set up in your trust specifying when the kid or kids get that stuff, they're basically getting access to all that money right away through a will. And I don't know about you guys, but I wouldn't want to have an 18-year-old have access to something like that. They're not going to use that money and invest it or buy a house and do realistic, responsible adult things with it. They would probably buy a car they shouldn't have, go on trips that they shouldn't go and be doing, and they'd blow through that stuff and not set themselves up. It's like the same case that you see when you see any of those kinds of shows about somebody winning the lottery, right? A lot of times they're worse off after, a few years after they've had the money because of what it's done in relationships and decisions and stuff that they've made. So instead of having an 18-year-old getting a lottery ticket, you're having the trust set it up to where it's protecting them from getting all that money right away. So having a trust also helps protect that 18-year-old from not getting that lottery ticket, but it doesn't mean that they don't have access to any of that money. You have somebody that you determine in the trust, which is called an executor, and that person is an adult that would make decisions for you based on what you put out in there for when the kid gets access to the money. So you can have it as a percentage of when they're getting access to all the funds when they're getting their piece of it. But if they're going to be going to college, if they're going to have living expenses, they need a vehicle, things like that, the executor can be the designated adult that makes decisions on releasing some of the funds to your kids to be able to get some of the stuff that they may need if you're not there. So one thing that the trust does is it protects your spouse. It allows the spouse to stay in the house and not have to worry about access to funds and different things like that if maybe just you pass away and it's not the two of you. So how much does a trust cost? Well, a trust costs anywhere from $1,000 to $2,500 in California. Especially for firefighters, we get group rates. So through my local, we have a company called BCN that we're able to get a trust set up. They have a boilerplate trust you're able to get set up, and you can alter it multiple times if you get more property, if you have more kids, and things like that. The only times there'll be any added cost to it would be if you end up getting divorced and they have to split the trust and turn it into something different. Just because you set up a trust one time doesn't mean that you can't change it as things happen. So as you have more kids, as you get more assets, you sell things or whatever, you can change the trust and update the trust to reflect those things. So it's not like every time you get new stuff, you have to do a new one. Once you get one, you can just update it as things change. Changes don't just apply to assets. You can make changes in there for guardianship stuff. So if your parents are going to be the ones taking care of the kids when they're really little, and in 5 or 10 years, maybe your parents aren't able to do that, or they move out of state or something like that, you can change guardianship stuff to maybe a sibling or some close family friends or something in the area to be able to take care of your kids. So who does a trust make sense for? Well, if you're married and you have assets like a house or any other kind of retirement accounts, and especially if you have minor children, a trust may make a lot of sense for you. Main point from this is a trust is not about the asset part of it or about rich people jargon. It's really about control, timing, and protecting the things that you have and the people that you have that rely on you. Thanks for joining me on Finance for Firefighters. Thumbs up if you like it. Leave any comments that you have below. There's some description links below that'll help with notes on the rest of this stuff. Hope you guys have a good shift. I'll see you in the next one.